Here and now on John Gormley Live for the next hour. Delighted to have with me Premier Brad Wall on the business of our Saskatchewan. We call this feature Ask the Premier, and it's when Premier Wall takes your calls on any matters of interest to you as a Saskatchewan citizen. Highways, healthcare, government priorities, you name it, we talk about it here. Let's find the Premier on the phone now in Swift Current, southwestern Saskatchewan. Premier, thanks for taking our call.
Thanks, John. You missed a very important World Cup update, though. Can I fill in the blank a little bit here?
Absolutely.
So there's a website that's tracking who is winning the World Cup of flopping.
Okay, yes.
The agony of the agony statistic is this. Brazil is leading 17 quote-unquote injuries, writhing time, 3 minutes, 18 seconds. They're number one. Chile has got 16 injuries, writhing time of 6 minutes and 58 seconds. So how this is tracking apparently is more flops. The flops are important than the length of the writhing time.
Yeah. And the South Americans are clearly very good at both flopping and writhing.
Absolutely. It's Brazil, Chile, Honduras, Nigeria, then Mexico, Costa Rica. The United States is the first sort of non-Southern Hemispheric South American country to be on the list. So there you go.
Right. Are you getting into World Cup? I forget how much I like this when I start applying a little thought to it. Like you, I'm a football guy.
My wife Tammy really is. She plays a lot of soccer, and so we're kind of living vicariously through her in terms of World Cup.
But you're just too much football. Like you can't give up.
Yeah, and the season's right around the corner, John.
True.
How can you? I mean, yeah.
Okay. No, I get it. Premier Brad Wall's here. We could talk football for the hour, but that would be not something we should do just yet. Temporary foreign workers, Premier. I have a number of items on my list. In fact, listeners, lines are lighting up already. Premier Brad Wall is here. It's 1-877-332-8255. Jason Kenney's announcement Friday, which essentially guts this program in the hospitality industry. It's going to take a while to kill it, but he admitted he could have done it immediately. First of all, what is your assessment of his decision? And secondly, the impact on Saskatchewan?
Well, it will have an impact on Saskatchewan and Alberta and economies that have where there are labor shortages. And first of all, I'll say this again. We always point out that the temporary foreign workers program has to be a last resort. I mean, even the name is not particular. Is something that Canadians aren't going to rally around. We must make Canadians our number one priority. But in the case of the labor markets of Western Canada and our economy, there is some requirement from time to time for temporary foreign workers for the particular program. 2% of the workforce, for example, would be temporary foreign workers across Canada. The numbers would be similar in our province. And here's an important statistic. Last year, over 50% of those that were temporary foreign workers or temporary residents became permanent residents. This number is going up. It's increasing. I talked to an employer in the food business in Saskatoon just last week at an event, and they had about I think less than a third of quite a number of temporary foreign workers, but 10 of the 13 were going to become permanent residents. So we need more people in Saskatchewan. We need permanent residents, not temporary ones. That's the government's priority. But we were seeing the program move more into that sort of a development, I guess, for want of a better way to describe it. And we have a labor shortage in Saskatchewan, and it's sort of all hands on deck. We are focused on First Nations, greater engagement in the economy. We're seeing some progress there. The average unemployment rate coming down, but at 3.6% unemployment rate, we need a program like this, and Minister Kenney has effectively gutted it. We're going to try to work with him to develop maybe a separate initiative, a separate stream altogether that doesn't involve temporary at all. That just really focuses on permanent residents. But this is it's going to be a challenge going forward in the interim because of these changes.
Premier Brad Wallace here. This is Ask the Premier. I have a number of questions to ask, but callers, we will get you on the radio. We have questions coming up from government-funded daycare to Children's Hospital to the film tax credit, a la Corner Gas, and more. It's 1-877-332-8255. Get your question in for Premier Brad Wall. Premier, announcement yesterday on infrastructure, $56.3 million has communities sharing this in infrastructure. Where does that money come from, and is it enough?
Well, it's the gas tax money, and so this isn't really new in terms of the amount for the province. However, what the federal government has done is has made this gas tax fund for municipal infrastructure and municipal purposes more flexible for the municipality. In other words, the list things for which these gas tax proceeds can be used has been expanded. And so we are we have a role to play. We pass the money through, but it isn't anything to do with provincial dollars. It's all federal. It's all federal gas tax money that's going to the municipalities. And I think increased flexibility for municipalities is a good thing, and we applaud the federal government for the change. We are working with them to finalize the agreement on the Building Canada Fund. That's very important for the province in terms of municipal infrastructure, tripartite projects or municipal, provincial, federal projects that need to happen. And there's probably more projects than there will be money, it looks like, from the federal program that will match. But we need to get that agreement in place so we can move on it. In the meantime, a couple of major projects proceeding in other initiatives. The P3 Canada Fund is now going to fund, as you know, the commuter bridge that we're committing $50 million to in Saskatoon, as well as the new bypass, $1.6 billion Regina bypass. So we're seeing some progress getting some federal infrastructure dollars in, but this gas tax announcement is basically the flexibility is the new part, I think.
Premier Brad Wall, okay, on that issue of P3 and building, you are under renewed pressure from the letters to the editor, to the NDP opposition, to some former school trustees and others to reconsider the announcement you made some time back for the construction of P3 joint schools. Are you going to reconsider?
Well, we're going through the P3 process. The reason Alberta has moved away in this most recent effort on P3 schools is because they only got one bidder. They put out a proposal for some more bundling some more P3 schools, and they've only got one contractor to bid, and obviously that's not a competitive process that would, provide best value for taxpayers. They've backed away. When we go through our proposal, and we were just talking about this issue yesterday in Regina Cabinet, when we go through our proposal to build new schools in the province, in Saskatoon, in Ormond, Martinsville, and Regina, and we need them in a hurry, we will have a competitive process, and I don't think we'll only get one. We've done a sounding in the market already. I think we're going to get more than one proposal. We'll have a competitive process. But were that to happen to us, we'd have to consider the same thing. But if we're going to build these schools and do it in a timely way and save the dollars, as Alberta did save when they had a competitive process, more than one bidder, we need to use this model. We'll still build schools traditionally. That'll still happen. But we may use P3s where they can be bundled, where we can put, the public and the Catholic system together and find efficiencies and get them done, because we have growth needs now. And the NDP, who will oppose what we're doing on P3s, their alternative is to go simply to the conventional route. And I can promise you, John, short of finding a money tree in the province, or a number of them, those schools will then never get built, as they were not built for years and years. So we're going to be careful. We're going to make sure it's a cost benefit to taxpayers. We're also going to get to work on them so that we can have the capacity in the schools for our teachers and students and parents as soon as possible.
Premier Brad Wallace here. This is our June session of Ask the Premier. Lines are lighting up. Stand by. You are on the radio now. I'm John Gormley, and this is News Talk Radio.
Text the show, 306-306.
John Gormley. This is Ask the Premier, our June session. About every month or so, Premier Brad Wall checks in. We take your calls on the business of Saskatchewan at 1-877-332-8255. You name it, it's on here. Okay, let's start with rural Saskatchewan, and we'll move into some good city calls as well. Kevin in Nipawin, you're on with Premier Brad Wall. You have a question on Stars Air Ambulance.
I do. Good morning, guys. Stars is really getting pushed on the TV and, asking for money and lotteries. It's all great. But what happens in the north, say, Hanson Lake Road or south of Laurent, say 50 kilometers, they're really pushing the coverage of this helicopter for helping people out. But it really only helps out highly populated areas and nothing at all past the 54th parallel. Simple and to the point. That's all I got.
Thanks very much for the call and the question. There are parts of the north that are difficult to cover from their current bases, and as this as STARS continues to develop and as it continues to gather support, and obviously the caller will probably know, John, you'll know the province initiated this with, the sort of the largest amount of support comes from the provincial government, and then we have a lot of corporate sponsors, and I think by and large it's been a very welcome thing. Now, there are parts of the north that are not as well covered because of the current location of bases, and future developments may take care of that. But I guess I just disagree a little bit with some of the premise of the question, because northern Saskatchewan certainly is a remote part of the province, quote unquote. But there are parts of southern Saskatchewan that are remote and not served immediately by the health care services they need, and so STARS is certainly very, very important in those locations, and it's something the government will continue to strongly support. But the caller's right. There's certain parts of the north where the coverage is not as where, because of the bases and the helicopters being used, it's not quite there yet.
1-877-332-8255. Your questions, Premier Brad Wall. Todd in Regina, you have a question, sir, on the film industry in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, John, I'm going to use some roundabout numbers here because I don't have the exact figures in front of me, and you can help me out with them after the question. But, an operating budget for Saskatchewan is in the billions of dollars. And when you made the choice to cut the film tax credit, I believe it topped end at around $8 to $10 million. And the year you actually cut it, it was just over $3 million. And when you look at an operating budget, that's really change in a pocket that you'd buy coffee with. It's really minuscule at the end of the day. And then you cut that film tax credit, and then Corner Gas pops up, and you hand them just under $2 million for their film. Now, I'm really boggled by this. I've had friends and family really hurt by your decision to cut the tax credit. They've had to move out of province to continue their careers and their jobs, and then you hand money over to Corner Gas. I want you to justify doing that for me and the taxpayers of this province.
Sure. Well, first of all, Corner Gas qualified for what's called Creative Saskatchewan money right now, which is not limited to film. Our problem with the film tax credit is that it is basically a grant for one sector of the creative industries. And it was becoming just a bidding war, frankly, with other provinces. The industry was saying we had to get to $12 million and higher and higher. And I guess I don't quite agree with respect to, the argument about it being small relative to the overall budget, because these things are cumulative, and you have to save where you can save to have a balanced budget. So what we replaced it with was a $5 million Creative Saskatchewan fund that's available for all industries, including film. Corner Gas was eligible for a part of that. We've also said to all the creative industries that if they've got a project that has a tourism appeal to promote Saskatchewan, they would be eligible for tourism funding. And that's where the other money is coming from for Corner Gas. If someone wanted to make a movie about George Reed or Walter Scott, and sort of picking things out of the air, our first premier that promoted the province, we'd look at it. We give money to things like the Junos from that same source of funding from tourism when we host it here, or the World Juniors, or other events, the Canadian Country Music Association, the International Aboriginal Games are going to be happening in Regina. They promote the province, and so much like a movie, the Corner Gas will, they're eligible for tourism dollars. But no, we're not going to get back into the bidding war for films that come here, and a lot of the companies come film it and leave. There's some industry here, certainly. But the films don't necessarily have anything to do with the province or promote it. So that's the difference. We'll still have film funding, but there's additional funding potentially for films or events that promote the province and are eligible for tourism dollars in that sense.
Premier Brad Wallace here. It is Ask the Premier, 1-877-332-8255. Another caller named Todd in Saskatoon. Todd, you have a question on liquor SLGA to the Premier.
Right. Hi, Mr. Premier. I was just recently returned from a trip in Europe, and there I could go to pretty much any kind of retail store and pick up a bottle of wine or beer, and that I didn't see a huge amount of drunkenness on the streets. It was very civilized. Everything just worked perfectly. It was so convenient. I would like to encourage you. I want to ask what your plans are for liquor privatization, and I want to encourage you to even go further than privatizing. I want you to basically relax the rules about who can sell liquor and allow a lot more businesses get into the business. The government should not be involved in retailing of any product. Otherwise, why not the government own everything and sell everything?
Todd, thanks for the call. And as you might know, we're in the process of gathering the input that you've just provided from the people of the province, because we've campaigned on a certain commitment with respect to retailing of liquor, and we're not going to break that promise. But we're developing our platform and our ideas for the next campaign, and we'd like to hear from people ahead of that. John, you'll know we've made a change here recently where I've indicated the government's announced that we're not going to build any new stores, even where new stores are warranted due to growth, because we've got highways to fix, frankly, a lot of them, and hospitals and schools to build, and I don't think we should be spending capital on a liquor board store building. So the new stores will all be private, and the discussion now is how much further do we go? Now, Todd's given us one view. There are other views that, like the status quo of government stores and all new ones being private. There are others that are saying, no, I think we can actually have more private involvement, and the government ought not to be in the retailing business. So I appreciate the input. It's helpful. We have our MLAs gathering that input as well, and I think we'll have more to report back to the people in the fall when we've taken the summer to listen to people like Todd on what they'd like to see on liquor retailing.
Premier Brad Wallace here. Standby callers. The next caller is the new Saskatchewan Children's Hospital to be located in Saskatoon. Troy has a question on that. And more of your questions to Premier Brad Wall here on News Talk Radio.
8255.
I'm John Gormley. Welcome back. This is our June session of Ask the Premier. Premier Brad Wall with us in Swift Current, his home base today. Premier, we had a caller lined up who just left us. Question on the new Saskatchewan Children's Hospital. Doesn't like the location behind or beside the Royal University Hospital, Saskatoon. Says, was enough thought given to the location of this new hospital that is now beginning the first stages of construction?
Well, it's a good question. I hope the caller's listening still, because the Health Region struck a committee that looked at this very issue, the location for the hospital, and looked at it carefully and all of the options. And every facility, by the way, was looked at with respect to Saskatoon options. But they did want it to be proximate to certain necessary services, and I think that's part of the reason why RUH was chosen, because it is the trauma center. And so I know they're going to be dealing with sort of traffic and parking issues, but they've had a long time to plan for it. You'll know, John, recently we've added to the amount of provincial investment in this to make sure it's right-sized. So I do appreciate the call, but the matter was the subject of a lot of consideration by non-politicians, a committee that the Health Region put together to look at all the options.
This is Ask the Premier. Let's go now to Balgony near Regina. Darren, you have a question on daycare to Premier Brad Wall.
Thank you, John. Mr. Wall, I'm a parent at a government-subsidized daycare that receives $150,000 of taxpayers' money every year. The board of directors at this daycare refuses to follow the Nonprofit Act and the bylaws. I reported this to the Ministry of Education and to your office. My question is, why does the Ministry of Education continue to fund and license a facility that refuses to follow the law?
Well, that's very concerning to me. We have taken steps to increase child care spaces in the province, and so there are some a lot of government-funded and government-partnered daycare facilities. In fact, spaces are up 53% since 2007, with more needed. So, if somehow I can get your information, I know that you've contacted our office, but if you'd provide me that information, then it's something that I would want to look into myself.
Okay, Darren, we will get your number off the air and pass it along to the Premier. 1-877-332-8255. Just making sure we're trying to get everybody on in order. We've got a ton of people standing by. Let's go over now to Kenosi Lake. Brett, you're on with Premier Brad Wall on the Temporary Foreign Worker Program.
Yes, good morning, sir. I work in the food services industry. We supply restaurants, et cetera, with supplies to make their business work, and I have a lot of direct involvement with the TFWs, particularly there's a lot of Filipinos working in that industry. I'm one of the rare breed that do actually watch the parliamentary channel, et cetera. And I just found that this was blown way out of proportion. I have not talked to one TFW that feel they're being abused. In fact, they felt like they've come to a much better situation than where they were. A lot of that, I work right in the heart of the oil patch. So there's a drastic problem with staffing.
The operators have seen their wages increase dramatically over the 5 years just to get people, whether they're Canadians or not. And I just feel this is going to deal a death blow to that industry. I've already got operators talking about closing down at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and those types of things. I'm just wondering, what can we do to address that situation?
Well, contact Minister Kenny. That'd be a good start, or your member of Parliament, because at the end of the day, it is a federal government decision. But you make some good points, Brett, because, we've looked at the wage issue. I've heard Minister Kenny say, look, this is driving down wages in Western Canada, and with a specific concern in that food services sector of the economy. Well, according to our statistics that we have as the government of Saskatchewan, the wage increases in that sector have surpassed most every other sector of the province, and they're significant, the percentage increases, and obviously that would include the 2.3% of those workers that might be temporary foreign workers. 7,300 temporary foreign workers became permanent residents since 2007. I think we would agree that's what we want. We need more taxpayers, more permanent residents, and this is a stream for that. So there's a lot of the rest of the story to this story, as you've noted, and the problem is that part of the problem, John, with this program is the name, and it is the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, and as I said off the top of the show, hard to rally a lot of support behind something called that, especially when even though I should say that the truth of the matter is so many become permanent residents, and this is a small 2% sort of gap-filling measure for companies that need to continue to stay in business here in the province, continue to need to pay all of their workforce, need to continue to invest in their businesses and in the province. So I would encourage people to contact their federal members of Parliament if they have a concern.
Premier Brad Wallace here. This is Ask the Premier. Let's go now to Swift Current. I suspect the caller from Swift Current might be wanting to talk to his local MLA and not the Premier. Darren in Swift Current, a question.
Yeah, Premier, number 4 highway coming into town from the south down to Railway.
Yeah.
How it's all those new businesses are going in there. It's getting very congested there. I was wondering if there's any plans in the work to put a bridge in there or a subway or something like that.
Well, it's a intersection that I'm looking at as MLA. I go by it almost every day. I'll take the bypass coming back from Regina. I'll jump off the number 1 highway and head down 4, and I live on the south side of town, so I know I'm going through that intersection almost, very, very regularly. And if I happen to hit it anywhere close to when it's busy time, lunchtime in the morning or after work, it's very, very busy. It's busy all the time, really, because of the industries that are there. So it's not yet sort of a top project at highways. There's a lot of highways projects that are there. Something that I'm aware of, and Darren, I appreciate the call because I'm hearing from other constituents of it that we need to do something. You'll know that early on, and just after 2007, we made some key changes to the number 4 Trans-Canada interchange that, they're imperfect, but they're better. And now we have traffic issues elsewhere, so we're looking at those as well.
Premier Brad Wallace here. It's Ask the Premier. Somebody just snootily texted, how busy could it really be in Swift Current? But I suspect that was a Saskatoon or Regina.
It's Saskatchewan. It's busy everywhere, John.
Okay, good to hear. Jonathan in Warman, you're on with Premier Brad Wall. A highways question for you.
First of all, Brad Wall, I'd like to thank the province for giving us the twin highway that we have going from Saskatoon to Prince Albert. It's gorgeous. My issue is, though, when you're driving back from Prince Albert towards Saskatoon, that highway never got repaved. It is rutted from all the commercial trucks going up to Prince Albert and going back to Saskatoon. They were all using those 2 lanes that we now drive on going back southbound.
The southbound run, okay. First of all, thanks for the call. This is something we've talked a little bit about in the past, John, on different episodes of Ask the Premier. We've seen in the last 6 years record investments in highways every single year. We broke our own record again this year, and yet there are so many trouble spots around the province, 44, 41. Then there's just the resurfacing issues on the road system we have, the highway system that we have today, including the Trans-Canada system, 11, 16. So I'll note what the caller's talking about there. The other priorities we have in that Warman area, by the way, in addition to a recent speed reduction that we've done in Martinsville, but also in that area, there are a number of other interchanges that are going to need some work down the road, big capital items. We have to budget for all of this appropriately because we're not going to give up a balanced budget, and yet we do want to make sure that we're making the appropriate investment in our highway system.
Premier Brad Wallace here. This is Ask the Premier. Boy, lines are jammed. I'm trying to get every call on the radio from Zennon Park to Regina, Saskatoon, Chaplin, and beyond. Stand by. Your questions to the Premier continue here on News Talk Radio.
306.
I'm John Gormley, Premier Brad Wallace here. This is what we call Ask the Premier every month or so. Premier, I had about 8 things on my list. I never get to them. Under P3 school debate, which we did do, I had the teacher collective agreement issues. Twice now, the teachers union, the STF, has tentatively agreed to a contract. The members of the union, the teachers, have turned it down. Where does this leave the province at this point?
Well, sure. If I could back up a little bit, last spring I had some of my own sort of personal informal consultations with teachers in different parts of the province, and certainly the contract issues were a concern they had. There were other ones too, things like connectivity. You know, the internet availability in schools wasn't what it should be. Things like curriculum, the speed of curriculum changes. You know, we've been working to address a lot of these concerns. We've now increased funding for the internet piece for our schools so that the equipment we're providing is actually the software is actually matched up and the hardware is matched up with connectivity. You know, we've got curriculum changes on hold, and we want to involve teachers more in that. So we've tried to respond to concerns. And with respect to this contract, the agreement that was reached between the provincial negotiators and the Teachers Federation, the STF, and there was agreement in principle, and so then the agreement was taken to teachers for a vote that they've turned down, as you've noted. That was for 7.3% over 4 years, as well as a $700 payment, a prorated payment, which would have ensured that our teachers in the province would be paid above the Western Canadian average. They would have put us above what's happening in British Columbia, very close to Manitoba, and a little bit less than the province of Alberta. So we're disappointed in the decision taken, in the vote taken, but respectful of it. Now the process is going to continue, I think, with a conciliation, and I think there just needs to be a connect with between teachers and the STF, so we can move towards an agreement. But you know, it's important, I think, for people to know that that's what's out there. We are trying to respond to some specific teacher issues outside the contract as well. And then there's the contract itself, which is now still the subject of negotiation, I guess.
Okay, let's go back to rural Saskatchewan, a healthcare question. Jason in Zennon Park. Jason, you have a question on first responders in the country.
Yes, I've been a first responder for about 6 years now in my rural community, and I just would like to inquire as to why there's such an appalling lack of funding for rural first responder units, considering that we provide in so many cases, the crucial life-saving interventions when paid ambulance and STARS air ambulance is still 20, 30 minutes away. Now, STARS is great. We really needed it in the province. I know they're heavily funded, but I mean, I'm out there not getting paid. We're risking our lives with antiquated equipment in vans that have bald tires, and it would be really nice. You know, we're not asking to get paid, but it would be great if we had a little bit of provincial funding for some decent equipment and some decent vehicles, to provide these services.
This is a very good point. We've had MLAs, our rural MLAs, raising this with the ministers responsible. Nadine Wilson in the Zennon Park area, for example, would be one of them. Larry Doak in that Cut-Knife Turtleford area has really championed this with me and raised it, and it's something that we need to pay some attention to, because what the callers just described is absolutely correct. We have great first responders out there who are effectively volunteers, but they're doing some, as you can imagine, John, some very, very difficult work. And we're going to look at every option we can to respond to the needs there in terms of equipment, in terms of ensuring that we can keep enough first responders. It's about recruitment and retention, as well. So I do appreciate the call, and nothing to report right immediately, but it is most assuredly on the radar as a part of the overall healthcare mix for the province.
Premier Brad Wall, let's go to Rodney in Regina. Rodney, a question on provincial parks for the Premier.
Good morning, guys. Good work, Mr. Wall. Hope to see another 2 terms. Just a little question on tourism and provincial parks. When the NDP had it, they were almost to the point of a disaster and an embarrassment. You've cleaned them up and improved them, but there's still a long ways to go. Just wondering what what we can do or you can do or the private industry can do to we need more campsites. I mean, it's to the point of just about every household owning a camper, and during the summer you see a lot of out of province camping coming, and everybody seems to be fighting for a camping spot.
Well, we have a great park system in the province. There's no question about it. And so we've increased funding significantly to regional parks in Saskatchewan. They had not received an increase for years and years. And right after 2007, we started moving on increases for those for the regional parks. And we have even probably to a greater degree been investing more money into our provincial parks. To the point where there's been about $44 million invested over the last 5 years, $7 million alone on electrification of some of the sites that were previously not electrified. And so while that's not a new site, most folks are demanding those electrified sites, and it's helped a little bit slake the demand for more sites. But you're absolutely right. There's more that we can do, and we are. In every single budget, we keep the commitment we made in campaigns to increase investment in the parks. We're opening up new sites all the time. There's a new provincial park around the Prince Albert area, as you'll know. We're also opening up the opportunity for private investment of sites close to me here in Swift Current at the Landing is a good example, where there's a number of sites there now. Take pressure off the provincial sites that are done privately, or at least done by sort of a non-profit approach. And we've indicated to the private sector and to that cooperative or non-profit sector, we're open to these in the parks where it makes sense environmentally and from, in terms of the sustainability of the park themselves. But we're open to them, we're moving on them, and we're investing the dollars. These are wonderful assets in Saskatchewan. We need to continue to invest in them.
Callers, we got nearly every call on. Premier, good having you by. Thank you for this, and we'll chat again soon.
All the best, John.
By the way, first edition of Rider Prognostications Friday.
Yes.
How would you be voting?
So you guys do the total score thing. So I'm going to take a total score of 52 riders.
Okay, 52 riders, and how do you get to that score?
We're going to win by 7, so however that math works out.
Okay. By 7. I will work out those numbers.
Thanks.
And by the way, I found a great video on Twitter. How do you say the name of the third rider quarterback?
How do you say I don't know.
Seth?
It's a trick question.
No, Seth.
So Daigie.
And there is a video on YouTube. I just tweeted. I'll retweet it. That Fox News did when the kid was at Texas Tech. They have Will Ferrell trying to say his name.
They do.
They've got Robert Downey Jr.
Absolutely. I'll forward that one as well. I think we can also get Rider Nation a little bit upset about the fact that in their top 50, the CFL's released their top 50.
Yeah.
Darian Durant's number 3.
Yeah.
Ricky Ray's number. I mean, shouldn't you have to play in most of the games to be at the top of the list?
Premier, we'll talk soon.
Take care.
Premier Brad Wall. I'm Gormley. This is News Talk Radio.